Yeah! You can tank if you want to. You can leave your life behind. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, we did have some challenging duties, but also players with the skill to match, so things went quite smoothly. That said, we start off with duty 1 being Buckman as Gunbreaker. Epic 1-2 combo spam. For duty 2, we went to Another Turtle Made It to the Water as Paladin, and this might be the fastest run of this specific guild test I've had. Everyone understood the assignment, and attacked the turtle exactly as long as necessary, and then switched on time. Then, for duty 3, we went to Holminster Switch as Warrior, and despite the rather difficult AoE pulls in this one, we didn't really have any outstanding issues. An interesting tip for Warrior at this level is in regards to how Raw Intuition interacts with Chaotic Cyclone. The heal from Raw Intuition automatically crits if the attack that activated it has auto-crit as an innate property. This means that Fell Cleave or Decimate during inner release will not work for this, but Chaotic Cyclone, which innately always auto-crits, means that the heal Raw Intuition produces as a result of the attack will also auto-crit. In fact, before 7.2 nerfed Chaotic Cyclone from 300 down to 200 potency, it was high enough in potency at these levels that using Chaotic Cyclone on single target was only a small loss on average over using Fell Cleave on single target, which meant it was a very reasonable choice to consider if you needed the healing for some reason. In AoE pull situations, holding Chaotic Cyclone to use during Raw Intuition to burst heal yourself up again more quickly can also be worth it, mainly because Chaotic Cyclone has a shorter attack delay compared to Decimate, but also because the healing is greater. You know, don't hold 2 Infuriates for that, but you can, wait a few seconds. An additional fun fact here now that we are on the topic of weird niche interactions is that while using an OGSD after slow acting action causes the damage and healing numbers to appear immediately, it doesn't actually make the damage and healing connect any faster than usual, so you still need to survive until the healing arrives naturally, which is why you would probably prefer to have Raw Intuition activated by an attack with a smaller delay than Decimate. For duty 4, we went to Rathalos Extreme as Dark Knight. How convenient! I'd argue Dark Knight is possibly the best tank for this duty, and considering the player that queued for this one is Agent Monica, as long as the one person here I don't know knows what to do, this will be easy. What makes Dark Knight such a strong job for this fight is that TPN's very short cooldown allows a prepared Dark Knight to use it for 2 out of 3 stack markers in a set. Dark Missionary and Reprisal also further helps to soften the damage. And if the Dark Knight is targeted themselves, Dark Mind is a solid choice. On top of all that, Dark Knight is also a bit more capable of stockpiling damage for the knockdown periods than the other tanks are. Unfortunately, if someone gets knocked into the flame patches, there isn't that much anyone can do, and just before the second down, Monica gets wiped out by exactly that, which also reduces our capacity to deal a ton of damage during this opportunity. And due to how little damage Rathalos takes once in the air, it meant we had to deal with a whole additional air phase as a result. Thankfully, that was not a problem, and we get through very nicely. For duty 5, we went to the first trial of Endwalker, which is big spoilers, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp here. That said, we of course went to Zodiac as Red Mage, and this run went incredibly well, with mistakes sure, but no deaths. A thing I ended up demonstrating somewhat absent-mindedly is in regards to using Manification separately from Embolden. Essentially, if you use Manification on cooldown instead of together with Embolden, it will slowly drift away from Embolden, 10 seconds at a time. And the justification to bother to do that is that in a lot of cases, if doing so means you get to use an additional Manification over the course of the fight, then it can well be worth it. But how does that work exactly? Well, this fight took around 8 minutes, which meant we didn't get the 8-minute Embolden, but because of me using Manification so aggressively, we did get the Manification that normally would line up with that Embolden, or more precisely, we managed to start it. There's of course more that goes into this than just that. For example, at max level, using Manification gives you 30 seconds to use Prefulgence whenever it makes sense, and aside from the range boost on the melee combo, the rest of Manification is just as good as simply going into Embolden with enough gauge for a combo. But this does mean you could place Manification up to 29 or so seconds before Embolden and still manage to sneak in Prefulgence. But at lower level, where Prefulgence isn't here, as long as you put sufficient amounts of melee combo inside Embolden, it doesn't actually matter whether that melee combo comes from Modification or your own pocket. For duty 6, we went to O2N, Omega's Catastrophe, as Dancer. Definitely a confusing fight, so let's talk a bit about mechanics. The whole fight revolves around the extra button, where a mechanic might be, for example, a Quake as a raid wide. But if you use the extra button, you being in the air means that it doesn't hit you. Another example could be blue circles that will petrify you, but these are altitude specific, so if you're not on the same altitude, you can ignore them. This culminates in a mechanic sequence where you need to use the extra button to float up, followed by blue circles producing only a small square in the center as a safe spot, while yellow circles effectively makes that very same spot unsafe. But the boss nullifies the float effect a moment before these resolve, so you actually have to dodge the blue circles despite overlapping with the yellow circles. Quite a fake out. Another mechanic that can be confusing is the Wriggly Noodles. The boss summons noodles at each cardinal position, and a bit later they do a big circle AoE. Except only the noodles that continue wriggling aggressively will do anything. The noodles that calm down do nothing. The worst problem in this fight is that some of the petrification mechanics are followed up with another petrification mechanic, like for instance the blue circles petrify you, and if you happen to be looking at the boss while petrified, then you cannot look away for the follow-up gaze mechanic, petrifying you again. So if you don't quite remember how to deal with a mechanic, my recommendation is to not look at the boss as the mechanic resolves, just in case. For duty 7, we went to Ultima Weapon Extreme as Gunbreaker, and my co-tank knew me. Hello! On the first attempt, we made it all the way to the last set of orbs, and somehow both tanks survived the party-wiping explosion from failing the orbs. I didn't even know that was possible. It is possible we might have been able to bring it home from here, but there were too many things that had to go right for that to happen. My co-tank Ashura mentioned later that they realized they should have used Living Dead to heal up and things like that. Shrug. I feel like we failed to turn a pull that probably should have been a wipe anyway into a victory, which is okay. On the second try, things go better, but we almost missed the last orbs again. I even made sure to use invuln to make sure I wouldn't die from boss damage while taking the orbs. But with nearly the whole raid surviving, we quickly cleared up the fight. Nicely done. For duty 8, we went to A6N, the Alexander Justice Boss Rush, as Reaper. The second and last boss are typically the two that can cause some problems. For the Brawler, the problem is when the boss has a cannon in both hands. The reason for this is that drill hand means someone is gonna get hurt, but not die. Cannon in one hand means tank buster laser, but cannon in both hands means stack. It is survivable with just the tanks working together, usually, but solo is usually not very reliable. And indeed, this killed the current tank. On the final boss, Vortexer, the trick is that mechanics combine ice and water that allow you to produce an ice cube to hide behind. If you don't, which is perfectly possible, then the later mechanic Ultra Flash is a party wipe. However, as we see here, that Ultra Flash is perfectly skippable. But if it hadn't been, in our case, the distance of the cube from the boss would probably have meant most of the team would have died. For duty 9, we're Paladin for Bird Up, and everyone actually held damage so we could kill all 5 boys in one fell swoop. Very nice and quick. For duty 10, we went to Friendly Clubs as Dark Knight. Time to spam it up with some unleashing. At least we had an archer that might actually have benefited from the XP. For duty 11, we went to the new dungeon of 7.5, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp. That said, we of course went to Clyteum as Pictomancer. Leading up to the first boss, we had a bit of a conversation about maximum damage versus optimal damage. The example being that using something like Retribution of the Madine while there are more targets results in a higher total damage done, while holding it for a burst on a single target boss might enable you to push out more relevant damage in a period where you can't do as much. Another way to look at it is that in an AoE pool, large amounts of potency are pretty easy to come by, since even your filler might scale really high as a result. But in a single target fight, burst itself might be more valuable as a result. It's a somewhat similar conversation to whether it is better to use a mage LB on an AoE pool or a melee LB on a boss, where it comes down to whether more concentrated damage on a single target saves more time than spreading out the damage to shorten an AoE pool is better. Obviously, the reason Medine comes up is because it can be held for a long time at no loss, so don't start holding cooldowns generally, just so you can do a smidge more damage on a boss. Now, the best part of all this is that the conversation culminated in me accidentally overriding Medine before using it. Whoops. And before we move on, we of course also fought Chort. And a Pixelmancer tip for this Chortius fight is that the boss becomes untargetable a couple of times throughout, so if you can plan some paintings during this time, you can really make a lot of value out of this downtime. For duty 12, we're back for some more partying as warrior. Time to overpower spam. For duty 13, we went to M6N, Arcadion's Sugar Riot, as monk. And we did have a bunch of scary moments in this run. On the first set of crossing arrows, our white mage went down. Then for the bullseye arrows, the gunbreaker went down, and they did not get up in time for the tank buster shortly after, which meant that I had to take it. Sending the defenses I have, plus getting some sage help, meant that I didn't even drop below half HP taking it. Awesome! Then, during the desert phase, I have a bit of a rotational mess up. I opened the fight with double Luna, but then for that odd minute burst, due to being focused on too many things at once, I accidentally did Luna again. However, this is still mostly fixable. We just have to do Solar Luna in the 2-minute burst from now on. Although, overlapping with this rotational mistake, our red mage dies to the cactus explosions. And then in the confusion after being raised, dies again to the cactus explosions overlapping with quicksand. Then we go into the river phase. Everyone survives the taste of thunder, but the white mage doesn't realize the taste of fire must be taken in the water, and the tank and DPS standing with them doesn't realize the danger they are in as a result either. We get them all up again, only for the large thundercloud to take out the gunbreaker and white mage again alongside the bard. And this time, the Reaper has to take the tank buster, and lives that too. And just before the fight ends, the gunbreaker is sniped by some bombs. I have a feeling this was a very rough match for the gunbreaker and white mage, and indeed, we all need to have a chance to learn. For D14, we go to Neighbor's house as Dark Knight. Remember, save the stun for the toad. And for D15, we go to fight some gobos as Gunbreaker with a Conjurer in tow. Remember, the bombs stun and the gobos have max leashes and everything must die, so be careful to not rush ahead too fast. For D16, we go to Trinity Force as Paladin, and here I try to demonstrate possibly a superior way to tank this duty. With the amount of mobs coming in from everywhere, having someone just focused on picking everything up so the rest of the team just has to focus on cleaving might work out very well. On top of that, Paladin's AoE at this level is ludicrously strong for a tank. Spending your time picking up everything also helps to protect all the artifacts in situations where your co-tank might not be expecting all these sneak attacks. Not that you have much to worry about anyway, it's a guild test. For duty 17, we're back on Ultima Weapon Extreme again as Dark Knight, and the Pictomancer knew me. Hello! On the first attempt, just like earlier, I survived the party-wiping explosions of 2 orbs in the final wave connecting, but I simply don't have the sustain to bring home the victory alone. A really random thing I noticed is that I consistently lean towards starting with the west orbs, and the pair that is consistently missed is the pair in the northeast. I'll try to remember this for future runs. In the second attempt, I make the discovery that my co-tank is a provoke spammer, but despite their weird desire for death, I managed to save them from themselves. And thanks to a brief discussion about the importance of orb soaking, everyone participated a lot better in actually picking up orbs, so it was not an issue. Very nice. You can tank if you want to. You can leave your life behind. And finally for duty 18, we went to Leviathan Extreme as warrior, and with a pretty solid team as well. Right off the bat, the paladin takes the tail, leaving me to take the head. The first wave tooth spawns, and we give a nice little stun to get the time needed to kill it, and pretty much everyone came to help, making this very easy. We also have most everyone participating in the gyrospume cleaning, so we make it past this opening part very nicely. And no one dies to the slide! As the next phase starts, I choose to hold resources as typically Leviathan hits a point where it becomes invulnerable anyway. Holding damage cooldowns to kill the add wave is probably a lot more helpful. I also get a reminder that Leviathan shoots AoEs at the tank at times, and elect to not stand next to the other melees dealing with the spume. Just in time for me to start picking up the blue orbs anyway. Leviathan hops away and targets a line shop at my location, which I guess is a convenient time as any to use arm's length. The slide gets our ninja killed, however. And just before the wave spumes explode, I manage to get them in a corner with Vengeance up. We review the team health and things look fine, and notably, Ilana, who we have previously seen is pretty much the only other person we need alive to win, appears to be fine as we ready up for the final phase. The last arena slide comes, and everyone survives, giving us plenty of power to deal with the Wave Tooth, and with the debt it is almost impossible for us to lose, and the limit break comes through for the clear. Very nicely done, everyone. 2 guild tests per extreme trial is quite something, and had the extreme trials really dragged out, probably had been a nice compensation, quote unquote, or something, but at least we had fun with these challenging duties. And we have also now passed 11/14 on the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi. Links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, the Wave Tooths in the Leviathan Extreme fight both put down a fear zone, but if you continue to not kill them, they will cast a raid-wide fear that typically will get the party killed when the arena no longer has a railing. Although, even with the railing, you might just get chain feared by the zone, stun-locking the raid to death. Interestingly, that raid-wide fear can be blocked with a barrier.